what we're seeing is that the barrier to become not a financial institution, but a payment institution is dramatically lowering, because from a licensing perspective, it's become easier, but also the technology is more and more socialized with banking as a service players. And the combination of those two means that other entities can become, a payment institution and can have a direct connection to the client. And it's a little bit still under the surface today, meaning that we do see a number of solutions popping up. But what I can tell you is that everybody's interested and everybody's talking about it, and everybody's thinking about how can I play a role in this, and is this something that I want to do? My name is Henri Dewaerheijd. I am the country manager for Mastercard for Belgium and Luxembourg. I've been in this position for about 6 years now, but I have a long career with Mastercard, been with the company for more than 20 years. We're there essentially to help fintechs grow and scale. In many cases, fintechs have a great idea about what they want to do, which public they want to reach, what type of issue they want to solve. And a part of that eventually is payments. What we then do is we bring them in contact with the right partners so that they can start issuing cards and become part of the payment ecosystem. I think we work on two levels. There is the startup community, and then there is sort of the scale-up community. In many cases, when we talk about the startup community, what we do is we essentially enable them to go live, reach customers, generate revenue, which is really important for them. And we do that either locally through our contacts with local fintechs and local associations, like Fintech Belgium is a great example. And in other countries, we have institutionalized a little bit more, like the Lighthouse program that exists in the Nordics. When a fintech grows and becomes larger, generates recurring revenues, has more and more employees, we no longer call a fintech, we call them a scale-up. And then they can enter our programs, such as the Fintech Express program or the Start Path program, in which case we bring them in contact with Mastercard partners, whether that's retailers, banks, other players such as PSPs that might be interested in their technology so that they can really get to the next level. It's a good question. And I think the payment space is tremendously exciting because so much is happening from a technology point of view. We've been, as Mastercard, in the payment space for the last 50 years on the cards. Now, it would be wrong to assume that cards are not evolving, right? Because we've seen a big evolution from magstripe to contactless to tokens that are pushed into your phones that allow you to make payments, instantly with a lot of security using a device that you use every day. On top of that, we're using this tokenization in e-commerce as well. So there's a continuous upgrade of the old infrastructure that you shouldn't discard. The other piece, getting to your question about changing dynamics and perhaps different shifting powers, we're very aware of that. I mean, we're clearly seeing that instant payments is on the rise and is really growing, and that there are different players there. Same thing with open banking, for example. Now, we as a company, we want to be multi-rail. We have the card rail, which is there, and we believe that it still has a long runway. But we're also investing in open banking. We're investing in instant payment so that we have the breadth to actually pivot and to find the right solution for the right problem. So that's our way to actually tackling that innovation that's accelerating and that's growing very rapidly.
And what role would you say the fintechs play in helping also Mastercard deal with all the innovation that are coming up?
What we like and love about fintechs is that they're often on the forefront of either a new solution for a niche or a new technology. And us really staying very close to the fintech ecosystem allows us to be on our toes, to really understand what's going on, what type of innovations are being launched, and which ones have the potential to scale, so that we're very close to what's happening. We learn from it and we integrate it in the way that we're operating.
Right.
So that's why, we're clearly working with financials, financial institutions, banks and so forth. But equally, it's important for us to be there where innovation is, and that's where fintechs are playing. It's an interesting question, because I think everybody that looked at open banking when it first launched with PSD2 thought that we would be much further than we are right now. So it's definitely not the fast start that we've expected. I think one of the reasons is essentially regulation.
Right.
What's happening there is that there's still a little bit too much barriers in terms of authentication, for example.
Right.
But those are barriers to actually making it a very smooth experience. Now, two things. One is we expect that there will be a PSD3. We expect that the PSD3 is going to look at that, potentially make it easier to delegate authentication or to at least lower that friction that exists today. Secondly, I think we do see it starting. We do see more and more solutions in open banking. My expectation is that it will first grow in B2B before it actually grows in B2C. I'm seeing a lot more usage, targeting corporates, allowing them to integrate all of their payments, all of their accounts in an easier fashion. And I do expect a faster progress there than I do see it in B2C applications.
Right. And is there any innovation that particularly excites you?
What innovation excites me? I find it a difficult question because, there's so much innovation happening already. And if you think about it, you could think about crypto, you could think about open banking, which we just mentioned. But what excites me is what I would call invisible payments. So the Uber experience is something that every consumer really wants. Like payments, in many cases, is an afterthought, but needs to be smooth and needs to be safe. And what I expect is that we'll see a lot more of that happening with the tokens that Mastercard, for example, is producing, that allows you to push your card credentials in any device. And we are seeing that really take off, whether that is integrating tokens in cars. For example, we've recently announced a collaboration with Mercedes, where you'll have your card immediately on the dashboard. Essentially allows you to pay in advance when you go to a fast food or to to a gas station. Everything can be unlocked directly from the car, and you authenticate using fingerprints or voice authentication. That's an example. And another example of tokens is you could integrate it into what we call conversational commerce. Like, think about selling in WhatsApp, right? It's something that I expect will really take off very quickly, where if you combine artificial intelligence, chatbots, transparent payments, all in one application that billions of people are using, it has a gigantic power to become the next evolution of commerce. And that's all powered by these tokens that we're producing, which allow us to push digital credentials everywhere with enormous safety. So that's really what excites me. I think it's going to not take 20 years, but it's probably going to take 2 or 3 years before we're going to see that. We're used to having wallets in our phones, right? But what we'll see is that these wallets will pop up in many more places. So the car is one example. The digital assistants is another example. In different applications, we can also push these digital wallets. But where you spend most of your time, that's where your wallet is going to be.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. Who owns the customer? And for years, it has been the financial institution, right? Because the financial institution, think about payments, was the connection to the clients. And we've certainly enabled that with cards that are in the wallets of everybody and that now are in the phones of everybody. what we're seeing is that the barrier to become not a financial institution, but a payment institution is dramatically lowering, because from a licensing perspective, it's become easier, but also the technology is more and more socialized with banking as a service players. And the combination of those two means that other entities can become, a payment institution and can have a direct connection to the client. And it's a little bit still under the surface today, meaning that we do see a number of solutions popping up. But what I can tell you is that everybody's interested and everybody's talking about it, and everybody's thinking about how can I play a role in this, and is this something that I want to do? What my expectation is that we'll be see more and more these, large brands that we use every day and that we know play some part in embedded finance and some part in payments, because it's become so much easier for them to issue a payment method without having a lot of regulation impacting them, and also having a lot of cost impacting them. Think about it. A couple of years ago, if you wanted a payment method, you needed to issue plastic. Right. And issuing plastic is by default a couple of euros, right? With a digital card, that's gone. So you could scale much faster without having all of those costs, still have the same security, and not have all the regulation burden. That combination is very powerful, and I do see a big future for embedded finance. It's sort of at the forefront of really scaling in my mind.
All right.
Very excited about it. I think we'll see a lot of that happening, and Mastercard wants to be part of it for sure. This is an interesting question in the sense that it's about where we as a company want to play in the next couple of years. And we are converting more than 10 million cards from the Maestro brands to the debit Mastercard brand. And the reason why we do that is that Maestro was essentially designed for the physical age, like paying at a shop. Debit Mastercard is designed for the digital age. So with that, we will allow more than 10 million Belgians to have access to digital payments. And our key focus, honestly, for the next 5 to 10 years is to make digital payments, especially in e-commerce, both safe, but also tremendously easy to use. If you think about it, the way that you pay today with your credit cards or with your debit card online hasn't changed that much. Actually, it's become more complicated. With PSD2, there's more authentication required. So there's more friction, there's more barriers. And that is not our vision when it comes to digital payments. What we want is to make sure that the trajectory, the experience that you have paying online is extremely simple. And what we're planning to do in the next 5 years is to really embed our solution, which is called Click to Pay, in the Belgian market. And what Click to Pay is going to do is going to allow you to not have to enter your credentials manually. It's going to be there in a wallet managed in the cloud. And it's going to assure that the required authentication, because that's regulation, required authentication is going to be extremely smooth in a way that you're going to use what's on your phone, either face recognition or fingerprints to authenticate. We're going to get much closer to the one-click checkout experience that we all love, but with additional security of the tokens and an extremely smooth authentication. That's my focus for the next, certainly, 24 months, but probably it's going to take us a bit more than that to really make it something that's embedded in everyday's life. I think the first one is diverse. Like the breadth of startups and scale-ups that we're seeing is really interesting, because we are working, for example, with Money Trans, and Money Trans is all about serving migrant workers. We are working with a fintech called Bonsai, and Bonsai is all about ESG. For every transaction that you make, eventually they're going to plant a tree, right? And that combination, I think, is really interesting. But we're also working with a fintech called Rise, and Rise is all about addressing youth and educating youth in finance, essentially. So really giving them first exposure to a card, payments, and the management of a budget. So extremely diverse. And you know, I could go on, but there's so many different use cases that we're seeing, which makes it super interesting. The second one is, I would say, young. So I'm not talking about the people in the fintechs, although they often are young, but about the stage in which we are in Belgium. Like, there's a lot of startups, there's a lot of people who really address a certain target, and they're doing this with all their passion and effort. But if I compare it to other countries, the ecosystem is still young, in the sense that we need to see a couple more of those fintechs mature. We need to see a couple more of those fintechs really broaden their scale, pivot if necessary, and really go to the next level, which would be a scale-up. And that's sort of the stage where we are. We're still young, we're getting into maturity, and I'm excited about, you know, the next stage of the evolution of Belgian fintechs, for sure. And the last word I would use is more of a wish than anything else. It's more in the sense that I'd like to see more fintechs, you know, start. I'd like to see more fintechs find Brussels and Belgium as their place to anchor themselves in the center of Europe, close to the regulator, close to European institutions, and drive their business from here. I think the environment is there. This is a country that's multilingual language. This is a country that really sits in the center of Europe. So I'd like to see more and more fintechs really find their home here. And I think Mastercard is there to support them with that. I think it's the collaborative mindset. I do see that, you know, the ecosystem is really feeding on each other, is really trying to help each other out, is trying to reinforce this, you know, positive circle of benefits, and essentially pushing each other to get better, to get more customers, to explain how they've been able to achieve certain milestones. And I think that collaborative mindset is really unique, and is really, I think, very particular to this Belgian ecosystem. And I think it's a great thing, to be honest.